Let me talk about discipline in a broader context, okay? Part of the mixed messages that we send our officers, we want them to go out and we want them to engage in, procedural justice. We want them to do X, Y, Z with the community. And yet internally, there is none. We are so punitive, the only thing we can think to do with somebody who does something wrong is suspend them or fire them. That's it. So if the goal is to really change behavior, what are options beyond that? And have internal procedural justice so that officers feel like they're getting a fair shake, which is going to change their attitude and their behavior and make them more inclined to do the same out there on the street. So is the arbitration system an issue? Yeah, I mean, there's no question about that, okay? But I'm not going to pretend as if I'm going to fix that, all right? The bottom line is we've got to think of a different way of approaching discipline and behavioral issues within our department. You know who really fixes problems within the police department ultimately in terms of discipline? It's not policy and procedure and all the punishment I can come up with. It's when we have a culture in policing where other cops stand up and say, we don't do that here. If we want community members to stand up and say, we don't tolerate this kind of stuff in our neighborhood, then we have to have the same attitude inside of police departments if we really want to stop misconduct. That's the only way you're going to make real progress in terms of changing the dynamic of things as it relates to how officers behave.
My police chief would say exactly the same thing about the arbitration process. But do you know who brings most complaints against police officers in the Houston Police Department? Other police officers. And that's what you want.
Right over here.
Thank you. My name is Ken Williams. I'm a retired homicide detective. One of the things that I did for a PD that I worked with here in Massachusetts, I ended up having to file what's called a False Claim Act lawsuit against them, a civil litigation regarding the grants that they received over the past 10 years under the False Claim Act. The doctor raised an interesting point, which is that when police agencies take federal money, they have to comport with the anti-discrimination law. And once they have to comport with federal anti-discrimination law, the things that the people in the streets are complaining about is how do they hold the people that are they're paid for by taxpayer money, how do they hold them accountable? And for reform and justice and for accountability under the False Claim Act, when we're talking about in the past, since 1995, $15 billion being expended in the COPS grant program for hiring, for the militarization of police officers, the training mechanism has always been there. The problem is the accountability mechanism. It's been lacking. So under the False Claim Act case, and I suggest everyone look it up, it's United States, Ken Williams versus the city of Brockton, if you have a chance. We're now proceeding in federal court, and under this mechanism, it could become a class action lawsuit for all those police officers that are within the agencies that want to become whistleblowers, that have information that can resolve some of these long-standing disputes and conflicts between citizens and police, because we have some people, unfortunately, that are abusing their authority. Ultimately, that's what it comes down to. Every agency, every business in the face of this earth has a certain percentage of people that will abuse their authority. So my question is this.
Good.
Yes. My question is this. Going over the CBAs, the MOAs, and the contracts and the policies and the practices, what would you say is, in terms of the internal mechanism for police officers to come forward, they often become retaliated against for their actions, for coming forward. What are you doing to provide safety to those officers that do come forward?
Is that for the
panel?
Anybody.
Every department has to have internal processes to prevent that. It starts at the highest levels of the department. It starts with the training and oversight of your internal affairs division. You have to have the political leadership that supports that kind of a culture. I mean, I don't know how any of us could answer any other way.
Yeah, and until you get a critical mass of officers that really engage in that kind of behavior where they're not afraid to turn someone in. Houston's a good example. Then that starts to correct that. If you don't have critical mass, then it's just like asking one of your witnesses in that homicide who lives in a very troubled neighborhood to come forward and stand up and say that so-and-so is the one that did the shooting. But if the whole neighborhood stands up and says so-and-so did the shooting, it's a whole different dynamic at work. So you have to create that environment where you get that critical mass.
The only thing I would add to that are the chiefs, superintendents, commissioners, and sheriffs that have been successful have demoted and shuffled their command staff to reflect their values and to push those values downstream. So I mean, the critical mass is the key, but if the command staff is saying to other command staff and in front of rank and file officers and in the homicide unit and in IA, that's not how we do things, and the people who speak out get promoted, you'll see people change rather rapidly. If you change the incentive structure, you'll see the culture change. But in the academy, in any organization, any business, we don't have a way to protect whistleblowers that's more profound and more secure than changing the culture of the organization, and that's a long-standing thing to be able to do.